And a real quick second question: how much say did you have in the casting of Hellboy, the Hellboy films, of Ron, Selma, Doug?
None. No. I mean, Guillermo and I certainly, the casting of Hellboy was a big deal, and I never thought they'd make the movie, so I never bothered to give it any thought. But somewhere along the way, a buddy of mine said, "You know, you should play Hellboy, Ron Perlman." I went, "Oh yes, of course. Who else?" And then as it got closer, when Del Toro became involved, and I'd seen Del Toro's first couple of pictures, I knew Ron was in Guillermo's first film. So I thought, maybe he's thinking Ron Perlman. And when I first met Del Toro, I think, the way I remember it at least, the first words out of his mouth were, "Who should play Hellboy?" In that way that said he knew who should play Hellboy. He wanted to know if I knew who should play Hellboy. And we both said Ron Perlman. And beyond that, all casting was entirely Del Toro. Though when Selma came in to meet with Del Toro, she gave me a big hug, and I said, "She's hired as far as I'm concerned." She's got my blessing. I'm easy.
Couple more questions, folks. We've got to start wrapping it up. Mike needs to get to the airport this afternoon. So.
That's right. Or I'm stuck.
Hi. There seems to be a pretty clear delineation between the folklore, gothic horror type world when Hellboy goes into those, and the more mythology based, similar to the way the first movie and the second movie are. Mm-hmm. Like the first movie is very Nazi Spear of Destiny.
Right.
Second movie is much more fairy, elf type thing. When you have those stories in your head, do you see them as separate, or is it just all the same continuation of Hellboy?
It's all the same. As I plot the stories, there's not necessarily a link between. I don't ever want to do a story where I explain away how everything is connected, mostly because I don't know how everything's connected, but also because it would be a huge bore for the audience. I don't want to do one of those things that says, there aren't elves, the elves are actually these Lovecraftian entities that turned into this, turned into that. Little by little, there are stories that will explain how I think things work, but I don't want to bog you down with a gigantic pile of that information. Even as I figure it out, I don't want to just kind of plop it all out there. The closest I came to explaining the Hellboy world and the mythology behind it was, what's it called? The Island. And that story was a direct result of working on the movie. Because in the first movie, suddenly the Ogdru Jihad creatures that are up in space, which I don't know what the hell they were, they come popping out of their cocoons and waggle their tentacles around. And it was never my intention in the comic to really explain those guys. But suddenly here these guys are going to be front and center in the movie. So I had to make sure that I laid out my mythology for those guys in the comic, not to make the comic more like the movie, but to say, the comic is saying, or the movie is saying this, I'm saying this. I've never tried to make the comic more like the film. If anything, I've tried to make a very clear definition that the comic functions one way and the film functions a completely different way. And certainly with the second Hellboy film bears no trace, no resemblance to my Hellboy universe. Though the basic idea for that story is very much the storyline that's still going on in Hellboy about the folklore characters kind of rebelling against mankind. It's just done in a radically different way with a pig-headed guy versus a Elric of Melnibone looking prince. I like my pig guy.
First, I wanted to suggest maybe the American Stonehenge in New Hampshire as a creepy place that Hellboy could go to.
Cool.
But I wanted to ask if there were certain pitfalls that you think a lot of young artists kind of hit when trying to create their own comic or trying to start off as an artist in comics that you kind of see a lot.
Well, the saddest trend I see, and it's not necessarily with brand new breaking in guys, but I see it all over the comics business, is guys who really want to be making movies. And they're creating their comics entirely to be a film. And you see a lot of comics with car chases and guys on cell phones. And to me, that's a TV show. You know, it's just, you lose some of the magic of comics. You know, comics are a place where there's no budget. You know, you can do anything. So the saddest thing is when I see guys breaking into comics because they want a movie deal. And yeah, it's weird to say, because yeah, I had a movie deal, but my thing was called Hellboy. It was clear that I wasn't looking for a movie deal. I never even thought there was any possibility of a movie deal. I just wanted to draw a comic that would be fun to draw.